All right, Gus, making this special video just for you. I'm gonna try to make it quick. I got everything laid out. This is my giant pile of ginger that I just got from Central Market. Got some things laid out on the table here. Other ingredients here by the stove, and we'll go through this piece by piece here. So, this is my bug. I've been prepping it for about a week now. I'm getting it up to, this is a half-gallon jar. And I've been using an airlock, but better yet, you can use just a piece of cloth like this, and then put a partially screw a lid on there. And you want the natural yeast from the air to help activate the bug. And so this is basically equal parts water, ginger, and sugar. I like to use the organic powdered sugar just because it dissolves in the water better. I've used non-organic powdered sugar as well. But you can see, if you look at this up close, I don't know if you can see that, but there's bugs in there, or little bubbles, and that's how you know that your bug is working well, is if you see lots of bubbles in there. You can shake it and you can see it's got bubbles at the top up here as it's carbonating. The house is about 70 degrees right now, and then I have a little closet area above the hot water heater that has a seed heating mat, keeps it about 80 degrees. And so when I want to make a batch, I'll put it in there and make sure that it's really warm, and then the bug will become more active. The bacteria speeds up its growth as the temperature rises. So this is my bug. We'll set this aside here for now. This is my wort, like I was talking about, and I'll show you how I make my wort. And this is just to make the ginger beer more spicy. All this is water and ginger. So I'll show you here. I have in my food processor here, I just chopped this up. It's just chopped up ginger in my food processor, and I've played around with different amounts, and it really just depends on how spicy you want it. But I'll put a whole cup, pack this ginger in here as tight as I can get it. A whole cup of ginger. I'll pour it in my funnel here. If you feel like you want a little bit extra, put a little bit extra in there. And I got about half the water in this other jug here. And this is distilled water. I picked this up at Trader Joe's today. Distilled water. And I'll run this water in here, and it'll send all that ground up ginger into my jug. I'm gonna unplug it with my knife here. Like so. There's a couple bigger chunks in there that I'll just feed in there by hand. And if it's summertime, I'll set this outside, kind of like sun tea, and just let it warm up. It'll actually activate a little bit, even though there's no sugar in there. But all you're doing is basically making ginger-infused water that you're going to use in making the ginger beer. And so I just started a new batch just to show you there. And we'll get rid of this gallon over here. Alright. So next I'll show you how I make a batch of ginger beer. Once we have our bug made here and grown, ooh, it's super lively right now. I've had it up there on a seed heating mat, so there's tons of bubbles rising up in here. You can see. I'm going to take my ginger wort that I made about a week ago, so it's super strong ginger flavor. I use a little bit more than a cup in that. And we'll take you over here to my pot on the stove. So this is my setup here. I've got just a clip that I use with a thermometer. What you don't want is you don't want it to get more than 100 degrees. So I'll turn my pan on high, and I'm just going to watch it as it warms up, I'll take my wort and I'll pour it through my strainer here. Start with my wort. Just like so. Now you end up with all this leftover ginger. You can see it's kind of swelled up a little bit from the I'll actually squeeze it in there. It'll use I've researched a little bit, but the bacteria will actually use different yeasts. I did wash my hands before this, but it'll actually use yeast off of your skin as well. And the cool thing about ginger bug is or making ginger beer is you don't have to worry too much about bad bacteria, because there's so much of the good bacteria that it'll actually take over any bad bacteria in there. So that's the only thing I really need to filter going in here is my wort. So I'm going to take my filter off there, and then you can see I've got the rest of my ingredients here. I'm going to do a gallon. Let's see here. This is a half gallon of unfiltered apple juice. I get this from Trader Joe's, super cheap. Probably the cheapest place you can get it. It is organic, much cheaper than other places. We're gonna do a half gallon of apple juice there. And then this batch, I'm making pomegranate. It's one of my favorites. And so I'm going to do pomegranate. This is a 32 ounce, so 1 quart container of pomegranate. And we'll pour that in there. And sometimes I just do a quart in a batch. Sometimes I'll do 2 quarts. And this might differ from the recipes that I sent you. Those recipes work pretty well as far as quantities go. When I make batches these days, I just kind of wing it. And the one thing that you should just pay attention to is how much, depending on how much juice you use or how much sugar you add, will determine how active your ginger bug or your ginger beer will carbonate. And so if you have too much sugar, if there's too much fruit juice, or there's too much added sugar to it, it'll overcarbonate and your bottles will explode, or you'll go to open them and the whole thing will flow out, which you've seen that happen with mine before. And those were batches that just had lots of sugar, or certain fruit juices tend to react more to the bug. So this is my organic powdered sugar. I've got a half a cup here. I'm going to put a half a cup in this batch, just because the pomegranate doesn't have as much sugar. Blueberry tends to react a lot more, or the bug eats it a lot more and creates a lot more CO2. So the other thing I'm going to put in this batch here is, I get this from our Central Market, but it's Italian Volcano organic lemon juice. And it's really sweet. It's a really nice lemon juice. And I'm not going to measure it, but maybe about a quarter cup or so. And we'll pour that in there. You can make it a little tangy with some lime juice, and also helps the bug a little bit. So this is just Santa Cruz organic lime, and I'll add a little bit of that. And they say you can use a little salt. I'm not sure what the salt does, but I got some pink Himalayan salt, and I'll put a little salt in there. I just read that on a recipe one time. I think it just draws out some of the flavor. And then you can see I got a little bit of room left in my pot here. So I just want to leave enough room for my bug that I'm going to add to this pot. But I'm going to take some distilled water, and I'm going to kind of top this off here. You can see our temperature is already rising. We're just above 80 degrees on the temperature. And I'll add enough distilled water just to finish my batch off here, and leave maybe an inch and a half or so for my bug. Kind of max out these pots on my batches here. I'll grab something to stir with. Yeah, this super cool spoon actually came from your Aunt Jamie. and it's my ginger bug spoon, so, or my ginger beer spoon. So I'll just give this a stir, make sure it's mixed together well, make sure all that sugar got dissolved in there, and watch my temperature. Get a little glare off this light here. Oh, that's a little better. So we're almost at 90 degrees. And I don't add the bug until I've got this to temperature, because there's times where I forgot about it and it got too warm and it'll kill your bug. So they say 110, 120, you start killing your bug. And so I like to preheat it before I add the bug in there. If you get these little chunks of ginger floating around in here, you can leave them as surprises to go in the bottles, or you can strain them out of here if you'd like. You can see there's some other little chunks in there that came out of the wort. My strainer has some pretty big holes in it, but that just adds to some of the texture of the ginger beer. So this is going to be a real good batch of pomegranate. So we're almost there, a little bit above 90. Actually warms up pretty quick if most of your juice is at room temperature already, like I said. Alright, so while this is finishing warming up here, we're almost to 100 degrees there. I'll show you, this is how I prep my bottles. Well, I didn't leave one empty here, but I just run hot water out of the tap until it's really warm. Ours is actually really particularly warm, and I fill the bottles with warm water and just let them sit here. So these are actually all filled, and then right before I fill them, I will empty or pour out the tap water. I haven't had an issue with the bleach or anything in my tap water. Just with the little bit that's in there. Again, I think if the volume of your active bug is enough, it'll survive any bit in there. And I think that the hot water heater kind of takes care of some of the chlorine issues. Anyways, the flip top bottles, you got to have bottles that are airtight. I've tried some screw tops before and had issues with the pressure creating in there. So I'm going to put the camera back up here so you can kind of watch this process. Let's see, yep, right at 100 degrees. That's about how long it takes to get to 100 degrees. You can see there, 100. And then when I go to fill my bottles, pretty basic, I just dip out of here. Oh wait, almost forgot. Got ahead of myself. So we got our bug now, and we got to add our bug to our ginger beer batch. All right, so I like to shake it up just to make sure it kind of activates, makes the bubbles, get all that residue off the bottom of the jar there. You can see there's some ginger that settles to the bottom of the jar. And I'll just add my bug here. And I want to leave a little bit in the bottom. So this is going to be my starter when I feed my bug again. And again, I'll squeeze some of this out here. I use pretty big chunks in my bug these days. It makes it easier to strain. And then I'll actually reuse some of the pieces in there too. So this bug here, I've had going for I think 3 years now. So 3-year-old bug. It's not really 3 years old because it just replenishes, or the bacteria is reborn. You can use this extra ginger. I've tried making wort out of it and whatnot. It's just not as potent as the fresh ginger is. So now that we've added our bug there, I'm going to take my Jamie Tracy spoon and make sure I give it a good stir. The ginger settles actually pretty quick, so any of the solids from your juice or ginger wort or the bug or whatnot will settle pretty quick. So I like to give this a stir a couple times while I'm filling bottles. And I'll use one of these clear bottles so it's a little bit easier to see. The bottles are nice and warm. I'm just going to dip this. And I want to fill it up just to below the neck, because you're going to want a little bit of room in there when you go to open them. And so they've got a little room to pressurize and breathe, so it's a little bit too much, so I'll pour that out. See, I've got it to about right there on the neck. We'll fill one more here. Oh, got a little crazy on that one. Carrie loves it because I make this huge mess on the counter. But I figure the bacteria is good for the counter. So then I'll take you here, and this is my closet above my hot water heater. And I have this seed heating mat in here. Just I got from a farm supply store. And it has a thermostat controlled, and I'll stick my bottles up in here. You can see it's at 78 degrees right now, and you can get those at any farm supply type store. It has a thermostat hanging up in the back there, so that's where I set it in there. This batch will only take, with the seed heating mat, preheating the bottles, preheating your ginger beer, this batch will be ready to put in the fridge in about 12 hours. So by tomorrow morning I'll be able to put this into the fridge. So the last thing I wanted to show you was just feeding the bug. Pretty self-explanatory, equal parts. I've got a little bit that I left in there and some ginger that I chopped up here. So I'll add the ginger. I got a new bottle, our new jug of distilled water. I'll add a little bit of water. I'll add my sugar. And I try not to feed it too much sugar until a couple days before I'm going to use it. So you see there I've almost got a third of a jar or more already in there. So you can feed it just a little teeny bit at a time if you're going to make a batch, you know, every couple weeks or once a month or whatever. You can also put this in the fridge and then not feed it. You can feed it once a month in the fridge if you want, and then reactivate it. I've had it live in the fridge for a few months actually, because it just slows it down really good. So but the kids and I might make another batch this weekend, so I like to give it a good shake, get all that sugar dissolved. I'll put my airlock back on there, which is not actually an airlock, it's just to keep the bugs out so it can actually still breathe. And then sometimes I'll just store it on top of the fridge there. It's just I put it on the seed heating mat when I want it to get really activated. So yeah, I won't bore you with filling the rest of the bottles. I've got almost enough here to make another batch of wort, but yeah, one thing that's important is this organic ginger tends to be a little bit smaller, and I'll show you here. I'll slice a piece. It's a lot more yellow than the conventional stuff, and they use certain chemicals on the conventional stuff that affect the bacteria. And so they say they leave the skin on because that has some natural yeasts on it and it helps the fermentation process. And then they said, or I've noticed this for sure, is the organic ginger works way better than the conventional as far as the bacteria growth. So that is my quick tutorial, 20 minutes or so, on making ginger beer. So I love you and have a super fun time making ginger beer. If you got any questions, give me a call. But play around with it. You can make different recipes, use different juices, try different juices. I've tried some juices that I've had one bottle explode. The kale juice actually, it reacted. I tried some with kale, and it reacted extremely powerful to the kale. There's something in it that it was almost unusable, because you'd open a bottle and it would all just spew out of the top of the bottle. So it's interesting, different juices. But pomegranate's good, cranberry is really good, grape is good. Carrie's favorite is blueberry. There's Trader Joe's used to have a juice called Power 7 that was really good. That's on the recipes as well. But yeah, love you. Have fun.